Hi, I'm Tristan Hall and welcome to episode 9 of the Alpha Tutorials podcast. Today we're going to start off by going hands-on with the new Alpha NEX7. This, as you may be aware, was a camera that was announced at the same time as the Alpha 77 and the 65. It is, for all intents and purposes, a mirrorless version of the Alpha A77. It's got the same 24 megapixel sensor, it's got the same incredibly cool OLED viewfinder inside of it. And what they've done is they've aimed this specifically at a more serious or professional market. It's a little bit bigger than what the other NEXs are, still smaller than, say, a Fuji X100 or some of the other mirrorless cameras on the market. But they've gone and added things like a little pop-up flash, a little bit flimsy, but it's there. It has an Alpha standard hot shoe, so you can use all of the Alpha flashes on it. And you can even set up a strobist wireless system once you've put an Alpha flash on here. It's got two control dials on it, one to be able to handle aperture, the other to do shutter if you're shooting in manual. And overall, the whole experience with this is something more similar to perhaps a rangefinder camera. So the best way to describe it, although I've only been playing with it for 2 days, is yes, I definitely want one. The question is whether we'll be able to afford it and when it will go on sale. In South Africa, the talk is that we'll probably only see this in February. So a little bit of a wait to go still. Well, outside of this today, we wanted to talk a little bit about autofocus. We've spoken about exposure. We've spoken about controlling the camera's light meter and how the camera thinks from all things related to light and the exposure side. But we thought today we'd focus on focus a little bit, or autofocus. Your camera has three main autofocus modes. The first one of which is one shot or single shot. Now that mode is a particular mode designed where the camera will not fire, no matter how hard you push the shutter button down. It's not going to take a picture until it's in focus on what you've pointed it to as your subject. The mode has some weaknesses, obviously, in a sports environment or where you've got a fast-moving subject. By the time the camera's taken the photograph, it could quite have easily moved out of where the camera stopped focusing. So it has a weakness from that point of view. So the other mode you can switch over to is continuous or tracking focus. And what that does is the camera will continually try and keep up and be one step ahead of your subject in that mode. Tracking focus obviously has some limitations as well. If you're photographing a portrait and you're used to having, let's say you've got two people standing next to them, you're using your center focus point and you focus and the camera's focusing but on one of your subjects, you hold down halfway to lock your autofocus and you move the camera to recompose. On continuous autofocus, that movement is going to make it now continue to focus and maybe go into the background. So continuous autofocus is probably best reserved for situations of high-speed action. The other option that you have is your automatic mode, where the camera decides between continuous or single shot autofocus based on what it sees in the scene. Is the subject moving or not? In that particular mode, the challenge that you do face with is it's quite useful and accurate a lot of the times, but sometimes it doesn't always choose correctly between. It may pick up a little bit of motion where you're recomposing your picture as the subject moving and switch over to continuous autofocus. So it's not entirely foolproof, but it definitely allows you to be able to switch between the two as often as you need without consciously being aware of it. Ultimately, the last mode that you could have, which is not specifically a mode per se, is you can always just go and switch your camera on to manual focus and control that manually. And with a camera like the NEX or the live view on a lot of the Sony cameras, it can even zoom into the scene so you can get quite precise focus when you're focusing manually. So try that out, go and see how it works and be able to experiment in different situations. You may find now why sometimes the camera's not focusing the way you want it to. If you've got it set in auto and you're moving a bit, it's probably switching over to continuous. You understand the way the camera's thinking and you can get the best results when you know how to override it. Lastly, I wanted to answer a question that came in on episode 5 from a reader that we received in the comments on AlphaTutorials.co.za. Hubert asks, is the A77 a good comparison to the Nikon D7000? The answer to that is a little bit of a tricky one. When the Alpha 700 was announced, it was compared directly to Nikon's D300. If we look at the Alpha A77 as a replacement for the Alpha 700, then theoretically it should be more in line in comparison with Nikon's D300 or whatever will hopefully replace it in the near future. Of course, the D7000 is quite a substantial upgrade to the Nikon's D90, and so in many aspects, people are going to compare it and already are comparing the A77 and the D7000, but they are two different beasts in a way. The D7000 is going to have a slight advantage at much higher ISOs than the A77 does because of the fact that it's 8 megapixels down on the A77. But at the same time, the A77 delivers incredibly high speed, frame rates, as well as having that much higher resolution. So you really need to look at the kind of photography you're doing to see what would suit your needs best. For the kind of work I do, I don't use a lot of high ISO shooting, and so the A77 with its increased resolution does exactly what I need it to do most of the time. And when I need to go for lower ISO or high ISO, I often switch over to something like my Sony NEX5. So decide what you're shooting, take a look at them, and do a comparison from there. That's the best advice we can give you. As I said, it's not a direct comparison, but obviously people are going to do those comparisons, and you need to see what suits your need as a photographer better. Well, that's it for this episode. Be sure to go and check out the website, alphatutorials.co.za. We'll bring you a more in-depth review of the NEX7 and some of the other toys we've been playing with on the site. And you can also download the podcast from the iTunes store as well. Till next time, keep snapping.